stage. And our Honorable Sri Prabhat Kumar Mishra Sir will join us in online mode. He will address our keynote objective of our session. Now, I'd like to welcome our speakers of the session. At first, I want to welcome respected Mohammad Abdul Ghani Sir, former Special Secretary, Department of Sundarbans Affairs, Government of West Bengal, to come to the stage to join us. I want to welcome our Honorable Professor Jayanto Bandyopadhyay Sir, Distinguished Fellow, Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata, to join us into the stage. And now I'd like to welcome Honorable Dr. Rajashree Dashgupta Sir to the stage. Now I'd request to our respected Dr. Anamitra Unrog Danda ma'am to join us into the stage. Sir, sorry. Anamitra Unrog Danda sir to join us into the stage. A severe sorry to everyone. Sorry, sir. I'd like to welcome you on the stage. Next, I'd like to welcome Honorable Professor Amitesh Mukhopadhyay sir, Professor, Department of Sociology, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, to join us to the stage. And Rajashree sir and Anamitra sir both are coming shortly to join us into our session. Now I'd ask to my fellow classmates and seniors to felicitate our speakers with mangrove saplings. Now I'll request respected Professor Jayanto Bandyopadhyay sir to chair the session. It's over to you, sir.
A very good morning to all of you. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and being invited to chair this very significant session on resilience. I am thankful to Professor Dhar Chakraborty for inviting me earlier to chair and be a keynote speaker, but I have some difficulties, including my visual problem, for which I move with this lens, and I'm unable to make a PowerPoint presentation, write it, or write a text. So he had kindly allowed me to not to be a keynote speaker, and we have a very eminent keynote speaker. I think this is a change for the better. So with that both limitation and prospects. The keynote speaker, Mr. Prabhat Kumar Mishra, will be joining us in maybe 15-20 minutes. But in the meantime, I would like to start the session and request Muhammad Abdul Ghani to make his presentation. He is a former Special Secretary, Department of Sundarbans Affairs, the Government of West Bengal. Mr. Ghani, please. আপনার কি PowerPoint আছে?
This one moving forward and that is okay. So, very good morning to you all. At first, I must say one thing. From the very first session till the last session, I have attended all the sessions, and I have heard with keen interest that what the scientific community has through their researches have brought out certain hard facts about the Sundarban now under consideration in this focal point in this particular symposium, international symposium. You are well aware I am a man who has been with the government, and normally it is regarded that the government managers are generally not the grade 1, grade 2, even not regarded to be the grade 3 category of managers because of certain limitations on their part, and on the one side, and on the other side there are certain other things. I do not go into details of that, but what I am saying is my topic is related to development plans in Indian Sundarbans, achievements and shortcomings. I just want to start with a small story. 2-3 days back, I was hearing a radio program about 11:30 in the night from Kolkata, and they are discussing about the past of Calcutta and saying that the oldest road in Calcutta is now what is called the Chitpur Road. In those days, it was a road by the river Ganga, and people used to see, they used to come to Kalighat Mandir and used to see tigers roaming around there. This is one. The second one is, there is a book reprinted by the Calcutta Municipal Corporation. 100 Years of Calcutta has been written in 1909. So you are well aware it is from 1800 onwards to 1900. That 100 Years of Calcutta, and there it has been very clearly stated that the tigers are available there around Calcutta, and there are other references, very big, in those days, the big boats are called podis. Anybody of you might have heard of this term, podi. Podi is a very big boat carrying few hundred tons of load from East Bengal to Calcutta, used to come, and that is they used to go at what you call this Chingri, Taligon's area. Nowadays it has been a completely urbanized area. So the extent of the Sundarban, that is now limited to a very limited area that you are well aware here. This Sundarban was earlier extended within our very information was live information was up to say Calcutta and beyond also. Now the thing is, the Sundarban that nowadays regarded is this particular line. You are well aware, this is a line called Dampier and Hodges line, and lately this is due to this is an outcome of a big extensive study of Sundarban taken up by the World Bank. Here our Mr. Ye is there, Acharya sir is there, and Anurag is there. They were also involved with it, and others also. That resilience study of Sundarban, the report came in 2014. That is a comprehensive report. After that, any kind of such report hasn't been published, and here the area of Sundarban that is included nowadays within the Department of Sundarban Affairs, as you are well aware, have been classified into 3 specific zones. Particularly the land area, there are 2 zones. One is the what you call transition zone, and there are certain blocks here, and then the stable zone, and beyond that there is a forest area, that core zone. Okay, now this is a hazy picture, as you are well aware, but this was a picture in which the area under the habitation and under the control of Sundarban Affairs Department was crafted for the department. The upper portion at the right top is the portion of northeast, that is the portion of what we call North 24 Parganas, that 6 blocks, and this was created by the Riddhi Management Services on my personal request. There are about 150 number of gram panchayats. In the 150 number of gram panchayats will come into details. That is the administrative area where the population as per the census 2011 was 4.5 million, and now it is expected to be 5.23 rather million of population. One thing from day 1 to the last session I felt was a necessary one that has not been there, is that there should be a person called from the having a statistics background who can correctly project what is the current population in different age groups might be in the Sundarban area, taking the background as 2011 census, because the census operation in 2021 has not been taken up, and it is not yet taken up. Now the thing is, there are certain very classical words, statements that we are aware of. Premature land reclamation is one thing, and that is being embanked during the 1780s. It was started, though actively it was from the 1800, and it continued throughout the colonial era, and thereby nowadays we are facing the first 100 years there was no strong how do you say problem for that, but we started facing the problem after the 100 years from 1812 onwards. So after 100 years, if we see, then 1912, but a little bit later also, we started facing the problems. Now the embankment, for this embankments, there was an act enacted by the then government called the Bengal Embankment Act 1882. It is to the common officers working in the irrigation and waters department, the nodal department. It is an obsolete act, might be appear, because some of them have not heard it, but the fact is that this act is very much in force, and the government of West Bengal in 1981-82 brought certain amendments to that act regarding the maintenance of these embankments, the protocols, how shall it be maintained, not only here but also for the whole of the whole of the state, Bengal that way, whole the Bengal province. And you are well aware that is undivided Bengal. Now, the construction of embankment results that we started receiving after the what is called this sedimentation rate was increased in the rivers, because the river waters with the sediment load cannot go to the floodplains, and as a result of that it was settled. And if you read this particular lecture of Satish Mukhopadhyay, who had been the brother of Ashutosh Mukhopadhyay, who was a chief engineer of Bengal, that lecture was delivered in 1931 and is reprinted by one of our distinguished but not given appropriate position in the government, the IAS officer, Mr. Bishwas, K.R. Bishwas. He was always there for almost 12-13 years in the what we call the Gazetteer, Bengal Gazetteer section, who printed certain books of the past with new introductions. One is Rivers of Bengal, and there it is there that and he, in that lecture in 1931 at Calcutta University, he was very categorical that the rivers are getting sedimented, particularly those rivers of whom we are discussing from the very beginning. At least we have got a very specific term, a specific focus on the development that is being consideration is from the Chairman Pollution Control Board, that there is an upper and lower delta projects and linking the rivers of the lower delta with the rainwater during rainy season can be carried from by the rivers like the Bhairav, that Jalongi, and that Ichamoti. Here it is that Bhagiro, sorry, that Ye is there, what is called Vidyadhari is there, and certain other rivers, including this Ye, what we call this Matla. I have seen a very interesting structure there at Matla Bank. Very interesting, at least 1.5 kilometers north from the Canning Bridge. In that, there is a mega structure that has been built by the irrigation and waterways for drainage of the land side water during rainy season to the river through pumps. A mega structure. Why it has been built with a spending about 35 crores is something the question, because the river bed of Matla in that area has become almost 4 to 5 feet above the land side height, and as a result, even during the lowest low tide, the water cannot flow. This is one. So what I am going to say is that I do not want to go into details. In the British era, you see, in the British era, there are certain objectives of the British colonial government to maximize the revenue, and that because of that only, that what we call this premature land reclamation was there. Now, after the Government of India Act and the establishment of provincial government of 1937, I am not talking of 1909, that Borle Minto, and that the 1919 that Montagu Chelmsford reforms, that is a constitutional development, and thereby giving power to the provincial government so that they can take certain measures in areas like fishery, like agriculture, like the river system and all this. I'm not going into all details, but the thing is that in the colonial era, or the British period, the last days, there were certain concrete action on the part for certain problems that were faced by the people of Sundarban. I am concerned about the people of that for 5.2 or like that of millions of population living in the land area of Sundarban. Okay. One important was the Cloud Commission, which was to look after the land revenue system and see whether the land revenue is exorbitant and like that. There were a lot of reforms which was brought out by the then used to be called the Prime Minister A.K. Fazlul Haq. I'm See, if you see the population from post-independence, then you will see the population of the Sundarban is like this. This is the population growth. So Sundarban as in free India. So before going into that, Sundarban in free India, I just want to recall 2-3 things. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, as you are well aware, and accordingly there are two parts: the individual and political rights, and then the social and cultural rights. Both in this Universal Declaration, there are certain key players from India, particularly one Minu Masani and another person was there, Madam, the brother, sister of Jawaharlal Nehru. Her name I can. Biya Lakshmi Pandit. Yes, Biya Lakshmi Pandit was also there. Now, when the Constituent Assembly said, and if you study the objective resolution as well as the fundamental rights and the directive principles, then you will find that almost all of the objectives that were universal human rights that has been included in it, where development has been given a special right, constitutional right, though not justiciable, but of late, after particularly this 1973 case of Keshavanand Bharati, the Supreme Court has agreed that fundamental rights cannot be changed. It can be changed only with certain particular objectives and what is called the basic structure doctrine that has been given. Now, from there onwards, it has been come to the point that the right to property has been transferred into a constitutional right under Article 300A. So what my focus is, during the period of independence from 1947 to 1973, the Constitution of Sundarban Development Board, as such, there was no special dimensions or the constitution authorities in the area for the development. So it was the provincial government, that is the state government, state of West Bengal, and its policies which were there. We passed through food crisis, that is food movement in 1950s and then 1968-69. We had that two basic laws which in those days land was a very important issue. So the policies were related to land, providing land to the people who are the actual riots and who are cultivating. So that Act of 1949 regarding Borgadar Act, or the Act of 1955, that States Acquisition Act, Jomidari Uchhed, and the Act of 1956, that is the Land Reforms Act, brought in, and accordingly certain lands, large quantum of land, which is in that case in West Bengal is first in India, that were vested and that were distributed, resettled among the people. So that way it was going till 1971. It has, in the previous session, we have been told, particularly Professor Ashok Kumar Sannal, Ashok Kanti Sannal has told it very categorically that in 1972, the first Art Summit, Indira Gandhi was the only head of state, apart from the country which is organizing, that is Sweden, only head of state who was there. And from then onwards, environment has become a issue for the internet, determining the international relation from then onwards. It's very interesting. 1972, then 1992. Meanwhile, so many other bodies were formed like UNEP and all other things. Coming back to India, what the then Prime Minister did, I hope I am within the time. I hope. Who is kept? How many? How many? 5 minutes, all right. Okay, it's all. Already 5 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So in 1973, after coming back to Calcutta, India, she brought out certain changes. First one is the environmental law change. Then the second one, in those days, there was no environmental law. The forest law was changed. Number one, she brought out that Water Act of 1974 through a mechanism, because although in those days forest and was under the state subject. So the first initiative for Sundarban area special development was through the Sundarban Development Board. We have a very veteran man who has been there for 35 years and worked there. Ashok, Mr. Acharya has been there. Now the thing is, after that, certain agencies came like this 1994, a completely new development department was created, the Sundarban Affairs Department. Now the Sundarban Affairs Department was there, and you see, after what I am going to say is, this one is nowadays what are the extent of institutional development of Sundarban Affairs, Department of Sundarban Affairs 1992-94, then Bokhali Development Authority 2013. Apart from this department like forest, health, family welfare, irrigation, waterways, water investigation and development department, social welfare, BCW, PHED, PWD, home police is also there, education, fisheries, industry, labor, minor, MSME, then MAME and all other departments are the stakeholders for that 19 blocks and the population there, and there are conflicting things with the Panchayati Raj institution sometimes and with the other departments. Even this GBDA, Gangasagar Bokhali Development Authority, has been crafted under the Municipal Affairs MAME Department, Municipal Affairs Department, and there is a notification from the Municipal Affairs Department that if any developmental action is to be taken by any authority, then the permission is to be sought from GBDA. So the Department of Sundarban Affairs as a department is to go and take admission from, take approval from a authority. So all these are very, very, very characteristics, as you are well aware. In the long run, the development, whatever we have done through the certain schemes. There are certain schemes like you see, I'm sorry, the schemes are basically initially there was food for work scheme, then 1980, the IRDP and other self-employment schemes were there for the development, and then certain schemes like you see, the employment assurance, and in the new millennium we have that scheme named that NGNREGS. Now the thing is, what I feel, this is my last sentence, what I feel is important. I put a question to the chairman of the Pollution Control Board that day, and he was to get it confirmed. What I feel is Sundarban has become a place where it is a international issue because of its very nature, its hotspots, its the identity it has been given by the universal authorities of the UN. Now the thing is, I feel that there should be a strong authority with officials who are working within this area, and they should be placed under the Department of Sundarban Affairs, so that, because you see, if this is whatever it is here, it is a research reports and all these things. We have been enriched like that. Rather, I have been enriched like that. But the thing is, if you see how many of the blocks have been discussed. Harwa, have you heard of anybody that Harwa is within Sundarban? Yes, it is there, but nobody concerned about that. Nobody concerned about Hasnabad. Nobody concerned about that Hingolganj. Only certain area, that last portion of the Hingolganj. So this is one. The second is, you do not have a comprehensive report of Sundarban. What is the health status of the people? There are standards. Yes, you see, people are living all right. So far, the South Chobbish Pargana report is concerned. This is a what we call a crude death rate, and I have compared it with the all India figures in the respective decades and the state and the South Chobbish Pargana portion. And I have seen that this is a report from the Deputy CMOs of South Chobbish Pargana. Those people are, to quote from Nozrul, টিকি দাড়ি নিয়ে আজও বেঁচে আছি, বাঁচিতে বাঁচিতে প্রায় মরিয়াছি, এবার সব্যসাচী বলে কিছু একটা ছিল মনে হয় তারপরে। তো death rate is not too high. People are surviving on their own. We are concerned about the Sundarban as such and the people's livelihood in the second part. For that, it requires a complete and thorough baseline survey for the functions of all these departments. And if under this university, a multidisciplinary team is constituted, and that team, the reports are all available there in the different reports, different I should say, annual reports of the different departments, particularly the block-wise reports. So that will do a very good service. And if it is resolved in this workshop, that it will be done by this university after a resolution of this particular international symposium, then that will be the very good thing. I want to say the last word. The last word is from my it is from Carl Sagan. Last word is from Carl Sagan, and I end here. I am sorry for going too much. What I want to say is, you see, this earth, not only this Sundarban, this earth is just one of 3.2 trillions of planets in our galaxy. And the sun is just 1 in 2 trillions of I should say star. And we have this Milky Way, which is about 1 in 2 trillion. But wherever you go, whatever information we have received, we have not received any traces, a symbol of traces of life. All life is here. And that for creation of that life, this earth has to, I should say, has to go through almost 250 crores of years, lifeless and through ages. In the geological time scale, we have appeared only 30 seconds below, but it is we the human beings, we have become so strong destructor that everything is going to be destroyed for us. We should think for that, because I'm giving a very interesting example. One very resourceful person was invited here, but he declined to come and join this program because of certain personal issues. But he gave me a very interesting, I should say, very interesting information that I want to share with you. He said, can we stop global warming? caused by industrial revolution development all over the globe? Second, can human civilization accept the control of greed and need of linear economy? Third, can USA, China, India reduce their contributions of greenhouse gases? Or at least local level, can we control explosion of tourism in the Sundarbans all through the year? So that is a big question that I put here to be considered for this first three part of the question lies everywhere, lies everybody of us. If we put 50% of the light here off, then also there will be no big issue. But that 50% off will do certain service to the state. If it is right or wrong, we can check it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ghani. A very detailed account of the administrative history as well as a geomorphological past, immediate geomorphological past of the Ganga Brahmaputra Delta, as we call, on its southern extreme. Before we go into the next few speakers, let me take the permission from Professor Dhar Chakravarti on timing. Where and how we should end, because we have to go also for the lunch break. So if you can advise me on the how to share the time among the various individual speakers.
By 3 o'clock, we must start the next session. Where we have one.
Yes, that's a very important session also. So can we aim at 2?
Be rest assured, I'll be finishing in 15 minutes. Okay, thank you very much.
3 o'clock, we can continue, provided we are willing to give up our lunch.
No, I think that's a decision the House can take. But can we aim at 2 and then go for lunch?
Yeah.
So
Great.
if we aim at 2, then we have 1.5 hours. And how many more speakers? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 more speakers, isn't it?
Okay, shall I start?
Just let us do the rationing
Okay,
of
sure.
1 minute. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have 4 more. So 4 and more, we can say begin the 15 minutes. That should be time for. Every paper needs to be discussed and questioned.
Okay.
Well done. Okay. Now we invite Mr. Rajashree Dasgupta of IIT Delhi.
Yeah,
for his presentation.
thank you. Thank you very much. I'll not take more than 15 minutes. That's my assurance. And
No, I think you can take, but kindly give me a 12-minute alarm,
sure.
and the speaker can then wind up in 3
No,
minutes.
I've been trained that way,
Yeah.
so don't worry. Okay, thank you very much. And I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Dhar Chakravarti, Professor Dhar Chakravarti, for inviting me. So I left Calcutta in 2007, and people like you keep me calling, so that gives me an opportunity to come back and meet my family. Thank you so much. And I do share a bond with Ramakrishna Mission as such. And there are some other stories some of you know, but that's okay. So I serve as an assistant professor in the School of Public Policy at IIT Delhi. I'm also an associate faculty in the Center for Excellence in Climate Adaptation, a center recently started by the Ministry of Environment. I also serve as a fellow of Institute of Global Environment Strategies in Japan, which was my previous employer. Those who are sitting in the back, so you are not aware of what is public policy. Anybody knows public policy? Please raise your hand. Great. One. Okay. In layman's language, public policy is how government should make a decision or give a compensation or whatever. And we train people or students like you to understand the research knowledge and then translate it to a policy so that the government can take it up. So if you are in this room for last 3 days, and I'm sure that you know much more than me about Sundarban. You agree or not? You agree, right? You have listened to a very series of presentation, and that's great. So what I will do is, imagine now you are no longer an academic. You are a policy planner. And you have some figures like this. Okay, so I made a simple search in Scopus. So Sundarban give me a hit of almost 1800 papers. That's huge, right? No other delta must have this much of knowledge products. Okay, and this covers 28 domain of science, social sciences, psychological sciences. And then we have a bulk of them are empirical research, 73% of them. And led by obviously University of Calcutta, Jadavpur University, Dhaka University. So if you are a policy planner, you should be excited with this figure, right? My local knowledge partners, they are generating so much of knowledge that should help me to take a right policy, right? So there shouldn't be any kind of doubt. But then the question here is, with all these knowledge products, and I know that there are very dedicated researchers across the universities, and I hope Narendrapur becomes the third one after Jadavpur and Calcutta. And then why it is not translated into policy? Where are we lacking? Okay, so if I go forward, so that's the age-old problem, right? We have 8 blind men trying to define the elephant, right? You know the story, how 8 blind men try to define it. Now imagine the elephant is also blind. Okay, just reverse it. Imagine the elephant is also blind. So an elephant can be, with apologies to all government officials here, they're the elephant. They have muscle power, they have the financial power, they are sitting in the top of the vision. And they are stories, they're listening to stories. If I go to them, sir, you have got an excellent finding on geospatial thing. You come to Earth, we got an excellent finding on social anthropology. And this person is confused. What the hell are you talking? No, you have so many of things coming to me, and then you want me to take a decision. And second thing is, people like us, and blame it on academicians, we go there, and this is just a replica of a recent conversation I had with the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Environment. We are showing some GCAM output. GCAM is the integrated assessment model. And he said, can you give me the details of this model? Can you tell me in a layman's language? I tried to define it. This guy said, no, I don't get it. It's a black box model. And are you sure this result is going to happen? I said, no, sir. There are, okay, I can talk in terms of probability. 70%, 75%. Can you give me in writing? This the same thing what you are proposing, it will happen? No, sir. Then why should I follow you? Damn. Okay. So I said, I'm sorry, sir, but you need to follow me because that's the only data you have. He said, fair enough, but you need to have some sort of logic. Okay. So what I'm saying, and believe me, I have colleagues who are working on very sophisticated models. Some of the regional circular models, they do come up with climate projections at a granular level. But then they have this problem, and according to their word, I even can't trust the data. So that's as simple as it is. Okay. So in other words, problem, we could not define the problem as such. And a problem, well stated, is a problem half solved. So if I ask you, with all the researchers, all the knowledge we have, what is the problem? Can we define the problem? So you can't define the problem. So that's somewhere our public policy, the lens, we are always trying to define the problem in a way. All of the researchers across these 28 disciplines, all of the policy planners, they agree to that problem statement. Okay. So I take a little bit of leverage from Indrajit's presentation. So he mentioned that resilience, when we talk about making this delta resilient, so we have to ask the question, resilient for whom? It can be an economic ecosystem resilience versus human resilience. Who benefit from it? That's the question we ask. Who bears the cost? Is the most important. Who bears the cost? Is it government or NGO? We had a debate on NGO and government, who is going to dilute. What narrative matters? Now, all of us, including me, we started doing some agricultural adaptation plan. And I happily agree with Professor Hajra. He mentioned that it's not number one livelihood anymore. It's gone. So ask a young farmer or a son of a farmer, do you want to continue agriculture? He said, no, I'm going to leave. I'll do something else. It's not the in Sundarbans, but the rest of the country also. Short term and longer term goals we'll discuss is, are resilient effort inclusive or leave someone? So we are talking about justice, all this part, we'll discuss about it. And then we have resilience for what? So we have socio-economic, physical, governance, different sort of resilience. Resilience for, this is very important. What do we want? Stability or transformation? What kind of resilience we're looking for? We have done fairly well. And I'm sure you are working on Odisha's comparison with Sundarbans. So if you see the Odisha cyclone in 1999, so great changes in policy came after that. Okay, so we have, in a way, we have developed the capacity to how to respond to a disaster. Okay, but not the changing of the root causes. That's kind of it. And also structure and non-structure. Okay, great. Okay, now what I suggest my students is to found or try to use a theory to understand resilience. And we have a number of theories. I'll just quickly walk you through about 3 or 4 theories which are very important. First one is the, as you know, the old ecosystem resilience theory, which is Holling's theory, which is resilience, the ability of the system to absorb disturbance while maintaining the core structure and functions. Now, today morning, we had this presentation by Mr. Devalraj. He was mentioning that he is happy with the stature of mangroves in Sundarbans, right? And so is FSI. So is some Chandragiri from NASA. So he wrote a paper that, Sundarban is doing exactly, is the best in the class of the Delta, which is conserving the mangroves. And the general narrative in the house is that despite of this huge amount of population, the mangroves in Sundarban didn't change much. So it's a kind of green tick for them. Okay. So if I take this theory, it might explain the ecological resilience of the Delta. Okay. Then we have a panarchy theory. What is panarchy theory? So it says that every system goes through different phases. There's a growth, conservation, release, and reorganization. So now if I take back, and yesterday presentation, somebody was talking about the colonial aspects of agriculture in Sundarban. So we had a growth phase. We had a sort of saturation phase. Now we are a kind of collapse phase, and it needs to be reorganized. So what kind of theory you are trying to sort of engulf to explain this phenomenon? Okay. Third is adaptive resilience theory, which I think most of you know, and which is it's not just reaching back to the previous state, but to go one step further, which is adapting to the future uncertainties. So this is where we need to really work on. And something called critical resilience theory is Professor Mark Pelling. I think some of you know, is very famous professor from UCL. So he tossed up this coin, critical resilience, and so which mentioned that in the process of resilience, you need to also consider about the injustice and equity, all these things. So these are 4 dimensions, and I will not say this is one particular resilience framework will fit the entire Sundarban, but there are gradual way of enforcing this. Okay, so measuring resilience. So I again start with we need to measure resilience. So I think you know know this code. So what is not defined cannot be measured. What is not measured cannot be improved. So in other words, if we just say we need to improve the resilience of the Delta without a parameter, how can I convince a policy planner? Okay, sir, can you please? We have improved. So what's the evidence? What are the evidences? Okay. So I would say I'll not get into this debate like how HDI is distinct from HDI stands for Human Development Index, how it is distinct from the conventional disaster resilience framework, but it can be a good starting point, and it is basically borrowing the idea of Amartya Sen's work. We have evidence, and there are, I think some of you, those who are working on adaptation, you have read the Neil Adger's paper on socio-ecological system resilience. So it talks about the low HDI generally corresponds to disaster, high disaster kind of weaker disaster resilience. Okay, and the third important point is development should also enhance people's ability to cope with and adapt to the risk. So if you are doing a development, that should not bring new risk. That should mitigate part of it. Okay. So there are some new integrated resilience index. I'm not going into this because of the paucity of time. So we did some work with Professor Rajiv Shaw. I think some of you possibly heard. We did some work to trying to understand what kind of framework we can develop for the delta. So we came up with a sort of 5-dimensional delta. We had some indicators. Unfortunately, however, the indicators, because of the lack of data and the granularity of data, we could not get that sort of essence of the from the indicators. So we could get the block level data. That's the level we could reach. But beyond that, we could not get with the data which we require. Okay, so and I was discussing something with some of you that how a particular disaster kick the policies or sort of motivate or sort of stimulate the policy planners. So Cyclone Ayla can be a very important point in the time of Sundarbans disaster history or disaster resilience history. You are mentioning that study from World Bank to 2014. So all of them are output of Cyclone Ayla's effect, right? So they come up with this kind of different assessment, and this great Ayla reconstruction project. Again, I'm not going into the outcome of that project. So basically, what we found is that all of these documents, and I did sort of a review of those things, came up with a 3 dimension of this entire system, which starts with the strengthening of the embankment, some 300 plus kilometer embankment collapsed. Because of that, there's a high 3 minutes. Okay, sorry. Great. The livelihood loss and so on and so on. And then therefore the more stress on mangroves. So this was the framework quite well established earlier. Okay, so I'm not getting into this. So there are some adaptation measures we started just after Ayla. And this is like how to enhance resilience. This is from the World Bank report. Please help yourself to read this. But they have come up with 30 sort of strategic action plan comparing 4 pillars. So that's something. And I like to have some couple of interesting things to leave you. One is that the IPCC's AR6 climate resilience development pathways. So that's the new thing that IPCC wants to promote. What is that? So it is basically taking that you have to integrate mitigation, adaptation, and sustainability. There's no way of looking at it separately. So that is something we need to ensure when we plan for resilience. Okay, and Indrajit told you, but a couple of important learnings from the Bangladesh Delta Plan. By the way, IPCC referred to this Delta Plan, so I'm not entirely sure whether Bangladesh would be able to implement this plan, but definitely it was referred in the IPCC's report, chapter 10, where I was one of the authors. So they mentioned about a long-term, short-term, and medium-term plan, and also they have specifically focused on the water sector. So if you see the out of 5 goals, three kind of work on water. Okay, and we actually started some project with IIT Kharagpur with Professor Abhijit Mukherjee, trying to understand the socio-hydrological inputs, how it can help to build a resilience. So we have series of publications, so you can refer to this web page. And I would like to, 2 minutes, right? 1 minute. Okay, I'd like to also mention about something, and we have discussed since morning on ecosystem services. There's a very interesting paper called Ecosystem Services Oversold. If you have time, please read that paper. Very interesting paper. What it essentially says that, you can't put a price tag on everything. It's impossible to put a price tag in it. And you are assuming a market which is non-existent. So you're assuming a market which is nowhere exists, but it's in your mind. It's the researcher's mind. So then IPBS, it's a sort of sister body of IPCC. They have come up with this framework called Nature Future Framework. And I sort of serve as a task force member of this Nature Future Framework. So they have defined 3 pathways. One is the nature for nature, which is mostly valuing the intrinsic values of nature. Yeah. So nature for society is more instrumental values, the way we originally called ecosystem services, and nature for culture, which is pretty important for Sundarban, because that's sort of the relational values. I think it can be a good starting point. This framework is still evolving, and the models are coming up actually. So that's something very important and exciting. So it can be infused in the long-term resilience plan. Okay, this is in a nutshell. I'm not going to repeat this. So what I discussed so far, but something interesting to leave it out. So I put a query in generative AI how do you envision a resilient Sundarban? Okay, so this picture came. I have not made any other comment. I have not put any other thing because I could have given, okay, show me a floating agriculture, show me a blah, blah, blah. I didn't put anything. I just simply put, show me a vision, a picture of Sundarban, a resilient Sundarban. It comes with something and it's up to you how you find the resilient features. Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Dasgupta. You had gone into some details on understanding resilience, various types of resilience. And I think the whole challenge is in policy, in transforming knowledge into policy. You have hit on the right sort of nail, but I do not know how that transfer to policy can be worked out, because I had been involved with Dr. Dondo about 2009, long back, on creating a vision for the Indian Sundarbans Delta 2050. And several policy measures were worked out, and some of them had been discussed, but still policy and action is still missing. And one of the major tasks in the next session or in the conclusion would be for an academic institution to relate the knowledge with how to go into policy and action. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Anurag Dondo. Anurag, please come up the stage and make your presentation. 12 minutes plus 3 minutes.
Oh.
Thank you. Greetings. As Professor Bandyopadhyay just mentioned, that he and I and Professor Hajra and one of my teachers who is unfortunately no longer here, Ashish Ghosh, we all work together towards creating a vision for the Sundarbans 2050. This was many years ago, as he said. We started the work sometime in 2008. We went through a series of deliberations. Same partners, by the way. Sundarban Development Board was a partner in that initiative and hosted several of the interactions. School of Oceanographic Studies was a partner, hosted several of the interactions. And in 2011, we came up with this policy document. It was meant essentially to start the debate, because I have had the good fortune of being in the Sundarbans since 1997. I am not from that place, and I hesitate every time to speak when Subhash Acharya Sahib is here. He is the son of the soil. He is also somebody who is what Rajarshi calls the elephant. But fortunately, Acharya Sahib is not blind, right? Being son of the soil, he's not blind. But I have had the opportunity to spend a significant number of years. And I have also had the opportunity to, I'm not an academician, by the way, so I don't theorize. I don't work on models unless those are models on the ground. So I am not good at drawing abstracts. So the question is, how does knowledge get into policy is where I think people like me become handy. Because I don't understand exactly how the two worlds work. I do not necessarily understand how the government works. I do not necessarily understand how the academic world works. But I somehow managed to speak to both the worlds, even without much of those nuanced understandings. And I get by. There are changes that I'm quite proud of. Having been in this region, serving the system, serving the people, and drawing satisfaction that there are changes that I was instrumental. To give you an example, the riverine traffic used to go through the tiger reserve. It no longer does. It goes outside the tiger reserve. I can take pride in the fact that I played a little role in that. The largest sanctuary within the Sundarbans is the West Sanctuary, Sundarban West Sanctuary. Many of you may not have heard of it, but it's a notified sanctuary. It's 560 square kilometers. Working for a conservation organization, I cannot derive greater pride than this, having been instrumental in pushing for a sanctuary. And that too, sanctuaries can be created under the same law, but there are two different provisions. In one, where you extinguish the rights of the users. In the other provision, you do not extinguish the rights of the users, you modify those user rights. Shojnekali, which is a wildlife sanctuary of vintage, as opposed to Sundarban West Sanctuary, have been created under different provisions of the same law. And therefore, in Sundarban West, people are still allowed to fish legally. And so you don't get into a conflict. So these are the kind of models I work with. I was asked to speak on planned adaptation or managed retreat, possibly because along with Professor Hajra, with Professor Bandyopadhyay, and as I mentioned with Dr. Ghosh, we took the pioneering step of sticking our necks out and say, you know, we really need to talk about a transformative change in the region. When Ganesh was speaking, he recounted the history. Yesterday, when Debojit was speaking, he also recounted the colonial history a little bit. People in the Sundarbans have existed despite the government. People in the Sundarbans have existed despite NGOs like the ones I work for. They don't need us. They've figured out how to survive between events. If they need us, it is for transformative change. Otherwise, they've been getting by for about 200 years. So I've modified the title a little. I'm not going to talk about either planned adaptation or managed retreat. The reason being, when we started in 2008 and several years down the line where I stand now, my thinking has not remained static. Yes, we advocated for planned adaptation at that point in time. I also managed to occasionally write. I've also written about managed retreat. But now I am convinced that it is organic movement of people. All of us, if you look into our family histories, nobody relocated us here in this city. It's been an organic movement. Either our generation or the preceding generations were able to capitalize on opportunities that came by, or there were enabling conditions. So in the remaining few minutes that I have, I will very briefly talk about the document we had created then. I will speak about a few recommendations that the House may consider, because it plans to draw up a roadmap, and a caveat for especially the student community here. So this is the document where it all started. It was a vision. It was essentially created to inform policy decisions. Rajashri was just talking about how to inform policy decisions. It was also to talk about preventing exposing the population to impact of climate change and to reduce their vulnerability. WWF at that time suggested an alternative scenario. The scenario at the same time wanted continued human development as well as ecosystem restored into its historical distribution area. Somebody talked about Harwa within the Sundarbans region. Harwa, Hingalganj, these were all under mangrove. Konishai was talking about tigers in Kolkata. They were mangroves. These are historically mangrove distribution areas. Now under aquaculture, agriculture, human settlement. So the models that I work with is, can we bring back mangroves in its historical distribution area for the various benefits that this type of vegetation provides? Okay, so this is where we started. And as I said, this was through a multi-stakeholder workshop in 2009. And again, the partners were the same. I take pride and also blame for what the document is and the trajectory it moved the narrative towards. It's been critiqued. I take pride in the fact that it was also a topic for a PhD research in Delhi University. So somebody actually took it, read it threadbare, analyzed it, and flagged what was good, what was bad, where it was inadequate, and so on and so forth. So it has lived its purpose, and I take pride in that. At that time, we had suggested that parts of the Sundarbans, and this also precedes this document, my own PhD, where I had talked about Sundarbans is not a homogeneous region. Socioculturally, biologically, and even physically. While we say it's Sundarbans, it's not homogeneous. And therefore, one size fits all is not going to work. As I said, I work with models on the ground. The same model that works in the northeastern part of the region doesn't work in the southwestern part because of the characteristics are different, right? So we had suggested that there be a district. There has been a regime change since the document came out. There have been more than once declarations of a new district of Sundarban. Not necessarily that this document is informing that decision. I wish it did, but it doesn't. What I do is also I write. I write to the authorities saying this district doesn't make sense. Of course, I get no response, but somehow that decision never gets taken, right? So I don't know whether to claim credit for that or not. But anyway, this green line that you see, and of course, this is not cast in stone. Newer knowledge might modify that alignment, but this is the part which is quite different from the rest. And when I say different, it is different physically because of the tidal impact. Because this is also in the forefront. When you're faced with a weather event coming from the sea, you're the first guy standing. So the impact that you take and a neighbor further upstream takes is not the same. And therefore, our responses, our preparedness need to be different for different parts of the region. So as I said, I work with models. My views are changing. We need to create conditions that people can take advantage of. This is one model. I think yesterday, somebody who was talking about fishery talked about cage fishery. We will be harvesting at the end of this month. This is bhetki, high-valued fish. At the farm, we have assured price of 400 rupees a kilogram. And we have at least 400 kgs to harvest. Professor Hazra works very closely with us, advises us. He often asks me, why do people not take interest in the knowledge that we share with them? I said, because it makes no difference to their lives. Unless there is transformative change, would any one of you be interested in additional knowledge, gyan, so to say? No. You would not be interested in gyan unless it changes your life. We are hoping that this changes life. But coming back to policy, when I was seeking permission for this intervention, I had to go up to the DM because nobody knew exactly whose permission was I to seek. And then, having gone to the DM, he entrusted me with another ADM. He said he'll find you a solution. So the ADM told me, unless you abstract water, you extract sand or minerals, or you obstruct the flow of the river, there is no mechanism to grant or not grant permission. Our initiative does none of those three. So I said, to sir, मैं permission के लिए किसके पास जाऊंगा? He said, मत जाओ. I said, तो कैसे करूं? He said, BDO को partner बनाओ. Because if the state has to stop you from doing it, it will flow through the BDO. So he said, BDO को partner बनाओ. So this is a model. This particular image that you see is, this one that you see has been around for more than 4 years now. This is by the West Bengal University of Animal and Fishery Sciences. I'm actually surprised that nobody from there is here because they do a lot of work. This has survived 4 storms. We've modified this model a little. This is the one I'm talking about where we will harvest at the end of this month. So this is a model that does not get impacted by high intensity weather events. So we need to have a policy. So my recommendation is when this house is deliberating that we need to have a policy on fishing opportunities, farm fishing opportunities within our water courses. It can be all the way into Hooghly, into Rupnara, and because West Bengal is well endowed in water resources, right? The other is, if you look at the image on the bottom right, it's actually a power station, a solar power station. Again, I take pride in the fact that we set this power station in 2010. This is the only power station from that period that still works. WWF does nothing. And probably that's the reason why it works. It's the community that has taken charge of the power station. They maintain a healthy balance in their bank account. They are a registered cooperative. Their village got electrified like all other villages, barring Goramara. All the villages are electrified. Then they wanted to do something with the additional power that they had. So they said, we will become a water enterprise. Help us become a filtered water enterprise. My models are always give and take. I'll give you something, but I'll also ask for something in return. So what we've asked them to do is sell water through the year, but as soon as early warning is declared of a cyclone, they will have to stop selling and start distributing water for free, door to door. So that electric vehicle, that blue thing, is actually an electric vehicle. During cyclone Rimal, fortunately, we did not take a big hit, but this cooperative went door to door distributing 3 jars of 20 liters of water, purified water, to every household within their catchment area. That's a model that makes a community resilient. Those of you who have spent a long time, and as Rajoshi was saying, everything is kind of Isla-centric, because that's the one where we, for the first time in our living memory, saw that kind of an impact. Water was a challenge. For communities, getting water to the communities is not the nicest thing to do. The community needs to be able to manage its water resources, prevent disease. So we are now talking to the PHE department, saying, sir, ye model aap apna do. Because they have standby generators. But unfortunately, those generators are not necessarily serviced and maintained on a regular basis. And to avoid pilferage, they're not necessarily always provided diesel either. And therefore, when it is actually needed, some of them don't work. But if it is a solarized system, designed in a manner that it can withstand storms, then the distribution network can become resilient. So a standalone system like the one that we have is not the model that I would propose, but turning the PHE system into a resilient model is what I would propose. Now coming to the caveat. And this is, so I think I'm within my time limit. And this is for the student community here. People use term resilience and adaptation pretty interchangeably. They're not. If somebody's telling you, you should have your hackles standing, saying, this guy is giving me some bullshit. Because I'll tell you, when we had the workshop in 2009, it was an adaptation workshop. Today, almost 15 years down the line, we are having a resilience symposium. Where is this narrative coming from? This narrative is coming from the developed world. For them, being resilient is fine, because they are at a different level within the development trajectory. My countrymen are not at the same trajectory. And therefore, we should be aspiring and demanding adaptation rather than resilience, right? So WRI at one time, many years ago, defined it very simply, that this is what your well-being looks like if you're just about coping. Over time, because of an incident, your well-being declines and you are at a lower state. So it's a downward adaptation. Deprivation leads to downward adaptation. Resilience means, all this theory that Rajoshi was showing, at the end of the day, it's pretty much this. That's a development trajectory. That's it. And that's a transformation. So what I'm saying is, even if it is not a transformation, my well-being should remain unhindered. My well-being should remain unhindered despite events. Look at ourselves, those who are in the room. What happened to us during Cyclone Isla? Nothing. We were inconvenienced. Our lives didn't go for a toss. But somebody who is a primary producer, his or her life goes for a toss. And it goes for a toss for several years. So we were yesterday going through sessions, papers, presentations of building resilience. Give me one example where agriculture in the field is not a sitting duck to storms. Unless it is an enclosed environment and you do very high value agriculture so that that investment justifies itself. No, you're not going to be able to protect agricultural practices and produce from events that we are frequently faced with. So as a caveat to the younger group of students here, if somebody is trying to tell you resilience is the word, be doubtful. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dondo. You have gone step by step from knowledge to policy and almost into action. Various models have been described. And what is most interesting is the definition of resilience and adaptation. And I recall that what is adaptation in Sundarbans? We had a very important and very enlightening debate whether the managed retreat is an adaptation or it is not. And I think that's an important topic, which I won't go into details, but that's something we had discussed at length, that is managed retreat from a threatened area a part of adaptation or not. Yeah. Yes.
And unmanaged retreat, what is happening now?
Yes.
The government will not have to pay, and the NGO will favor that because you are not.
Well, I think. Yeah, we have now the last presentation of the session before we go for the keynote address. It is Amitesh Mukhopadhyay, Professor Amitesh Mukhopadhyay. Floor is yours.
Well, at the outset, thanks very much, Professor Bandyopadhyay, the chair. And my thanks goes to Professor Dhar Chakraborty, to the Institute, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, Narendrapur campus, for this very warm invite to come share some of my thoughts with you here. Of course, for the past 2 days, a lot has already been discussed. And I wish I were part of those discussions, but the loss is entirely mine that I couldn't be here. And my previous speakers nearly set the tone of what this particular session is hinting at. because we are nearly at the end of this 3 days workshop, conference, and the session after lunch is going to be basically telling of and sharing of the direction in which all these 2-3 days brainstorming would lead us to. I hope that my little share could perhaps be somewhat a step in that direction. But certainly with some trepidation in my mind. And of course, the cost of occupying a moral high ground for people who have always shown that the life is possible despite all odds. The title which has been assigned to this particular presentation of mine was Conservation and Conflict, Hopes and Despair for the Future. And if we really want to take conservation and conflict into perspective, I will perhaps delve a little into the history of the region to come back to the question that it poses, conservation and conflict. And I would start with a quotation from Ronald Heading at a conference on the commons in South Asia, Societal Pressure and Environmental Integrity in the Sundarbans, held at Washington, D.C. in November 1987. And I quote that unlike the forest inhabited by the tribals elsewhere in India, where the conflict is between utilization of an existing habitat common property resources and historically novel status claim to conservation and management, the remaining and shrinking mangrove forest have become an object of conflict between social forces seeking a livelihood on the one hand and the state that seeks to limit that process on the other. Well, Heading's statement is true in some sense that it draws attention to the uniqueness of the Sundarbans biography and the forest, but at the same time, if you consider the regime of conservation that had unfolded in colonial India and subsequently as part of the colonial legacy in post-independent India, then Sundarbans shared its destiny with many other forest reserves. The principle on which most, if not all, conservation projects have grown is that of restriction and exclusion. So basically, there's a way in which historically conservation projects are unfolded at part of colonial rule and the legacy that was followed in most part of independent India, at least in its first 3-4 decades. And people in the Sundarbans today suffer, I argue, that the burden and predicament of that history, particularly that of the colonial history, where the forest was made to appear as though it had two distinct biographies and careers. First 100 years, it was an obstacle to growth and development, where reclamation for agriculture led to settlement when forest was viewed more as a wasteland to be developed into something of a profit and a revenue earning. Next 100 years, particularly the passage of Forest Act of 1878, when it was seen forest mostly as a source itself, a profitable resource, and thereafter invoke the same idea of the West to reflect the native claims to the forest. And this is what takes us into the heart of this debate, which probably lies at the very, very, very center of this conservation, conflict, etc., in much of the way in which this project and scheme unfolded in most of India in its independence, is the debate over commons and what exactly common would possibly be, particularly when much of what appeared as a tragedy of the commons under certain way in which colonial capitalism proceeded and unfolded in most part of the subcontinent here in this part of the world. And I suggest that this common had a distinct texture of history in the subcontinent and even in South Asia, And the burden of history often glosses over this historical texture. And that's what I call the communitarian ownership or claim to commons that had been the chief characteristic of society and culture in mostly pre-colonial times. Even when the great empires culturally centrally ruled India, subcontinents such as the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughals, we have references to communitarian ownership of land and forest. In pre-colonial India, we have historical evidences when the tribal forest being colonized, when the tribals found themselves displaced from their user rights to the forest. The subcontinent particularly had the existence of a superior, even when overarching zamindari rights, that did not preclude the simultaneous operation of subordinate, often collective claims to user rights underneath this top layer. In other words, the multiplicity of overlapping rights to the same physical patch of soil, whether it was landed agriculture, grazing lands, or forest, and that complicates our historical sense of ownership and commons. And this historical complexity perhaps deepens when we turn to the pre-colonial Sundarban, which is mired in something of a historical amnesia. Because very little that we got to hear about Sundarbans that existed prior to colonial rule. It was as if that the history starts with colonial rule and everything that happened with Sundarbans in its pristine past was something of a prehistory of the region. Except through Richard Eaton's very seminal writings, The Rise of Islam and the Bengal Frontier. A different idea of expansion of agriculture frontier under the tutelage of the Sufi peers and fakirs who organize people, mostly the wandering people, engaged in different odd activities, often trained in the art of cultivation and cultivation that developed a symbiotic relation with forest. I quote Eaton that this charisma of the peers in Sundarbans rested on three overlapping and interconnected bases. Their connection with forest and the wild and dangerous domain, which they were believed to have subdued, their relation with supernatural world, which they often believe that they will continuing influence, and their relation with communities who came to comprise a hardy and resilient class of cultivators. This symbiotic relation between forest tigers and Sufi peats was also noted and visited time and again in the writings of the British gazetteer writers such as O'Malley, travelogues written by people like Marshalls, and British officers such as Francis Buchanan. The above points us, therefore, in the direction of a moral ecology within which people's relation with Sundarban forest resources, tigers, wildlife unfolds, and today on an everyday basis. With population increase and consequences of pressure on the natural resources, conservation of forests is of crucial importance. And however, the talk is not to argue against conservation, but basically to situate the imperative of conservation and people's life and living to suggest that they co-constitute each other in this delta. This co-constituting is materialized by a number of processes which often involve cults, rituals, practices, which are often in the eyes of science, relegated to the realm of superstitions, popular beliefs, but nonetheless, they seem to open up a world of moral ecology which informs people's perceptions of the forest, its sanctity and sanity. And it is true that if we witness here often losses of human lives to tigers, and conflict often appears to be the form in which this conservation effort is unfolding. But it is also true that this conservation is not something which has been static over time. Something that Anurag has already mentioned, that the conservation, even when it is state-sponsored, funded, it interacts with people in as much as people interact with conservation drives. And this co-constitution then makes conservation appear as something which is much more situated, much more operating within its own ecological texture, contour of the region. And therefore, it is often situated and often rendered legible in a number of ways which people understand as their own. And it is that which I think is very important, particularly when we see that we live today in a regime of joint forest management, which is a very significant shift. If we look at the very earlier ivory tower kind of a conservation effort, which had been the brainchild of the British colonial legacy, and over the years in independent India, it had struck its root firmly into the soil. And the more it had struck its root into the soil, the more it had seemed kind of very inoperative because of the number of ways in which people engage these conservation projects, which is why we had a turnaround probably around the decade of the 80s and 90s, when not only did we have a regime of and a scheme of joint forest management, but conservation projects increasingly became informed by a number of practical considerations emerging from the soil of a particular land where conservation effort has been organized. It doesn't mean that the conservation projects had not evicted people, conservation projects had not displaced people, but the more it had displaced and evicted in the earlier years, the more it seemed necessary to integrate people into this project, and which I think is a very important moment if we are to understand conservation and people in terms of either and or. Because it's not a situation where we are trying to understand conservation and people as either or, but more in terms of the situated experiences that people assign to their conservations, and the way in which conservation does undergo changes in keeping people in mind, keeping people in their vision. And therefore, I think the question which seems most important today, not only in a place like Sundarbans, where we hear people losing their life, we hear people often leaving the land in search of work elsewhere. But despite all of that, it is a home that people often consider as their own in times of disaster, in times of distress, or even times when people had gone out, they had come back thinking that the life elsewhere might not have been as safer. And it is that with which I would perhaps leave this question to all of you, that do we really understand conservation in today's India 2024 as something which is very exclusive? Because conservation efforts, no matter how exclusive they are not going to be successful in its daily altercation, engagement, and their daily interaction with the locals. And often the people who are at the conservations at the very local level often are people who occupy very multiplicity of subject positions. In other words, people who are at the very bottom of these conservation efforts, people who are in the very forefront of this conservation program, are often people who are either son of the soil, who are people who hail from the localities, people who often occupy positions which are multiple, and therefore they are the ones who make conservation efforts their own, and the way in which they build a more perhaps a kind of a longer sustainable relation in years to come. And with that, I would leave much of my question to you as to how you understand the prospect of Sundarbans conservation in years to come. Because if we think that if there are people dying, if there are people who do not have enough livelihood because the region does not seem to offer people many livelihoods, and therefore conservation, no matter how restrictive it is, often deprives people of their life and living, then the alternative could very well be something very uncertain, unanticipated, in the sense that if we think of something which could perhaps provide a solution, that if we think that we could move these people out of this region, then probably two consequences follow. One is that where would they relocate? Probably that's more a kind of a question which is something left to the imagination of the way in which administration often works. But perhaps if we understand policy as a kind of a means to mitigate some of the problems, then probably the way in which we invoke policy could become the start of a different set of problems. The way in which policy is often construed, that could very well be the beginning of a new set of problems, number one. And secondly, is that as we saw with the most of the conservation projects all over India, people who have often been part of conservation site, who have lived their lives in the forest or in and around the forest for many years, which is why we often call many of these people as indigenous, as people who have lived in that region since time immemorial. We do not assign that level when it comes to Sundarban because it is largely a settlement of the migrants, and therefore they don't qualify to be labeled as indigenous. But the question that remains is that perhaps it's time that we revisit this word. And as it happened with many conservation projects where people have often been evicted, displaced from the conservation sites, had often been reduced to mere, mere errands, people who had often found themselves doing odd jobs, far removed from things that they were more familiar and they found themselves more convenient doing. And if that happens also in Sundarbans, of course, Sundarban is a place where we often seen people moving out, getting into informal sector, doing odd jobs in construction works, all of that. But also there is a core community which still lives through and lives in Sundarbans, who are often involved in livelihoods which are particularly grown out of the peculiarity and the uniqueness of the region. And if those people are displaced, and if they are reduced to the positions of odd job seekers, then probably we are in for a different set of a problem. And maybe 20 years down the line, we might be here coming together, deciding what is going to happen to these people who have once been doing fishing, doing forest, and today found themselves reduced to the position of odd job seekers and errands. Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukhopadhyay. Handling the most sensitive, probably, issue of the complex relationship between conservation, ecosystem-based conservation, and the conflict between human societies and the conservation process. Every Project Tiger is facing this question. Every land conservation, forest conservation is facing this question. And what is important to understand is the involuntary displacement, which in our country has got a bad image because of the large dam projects. Large dam projects always have involuntary displacement. What is important because of the various presentations, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, Anurag Dondo, that voluntary displacement or voluntary transfer of people is probably the only way, and that is a very long and very crucial educational process. Involuntary displacement doesn't give an easy solution. Voluntary displacement needs a very big preparatory period. And that's the complexity of the relation between conservation and conflict between people and the conservation process. We have half an hour in which we have to hear the presentation by Mr. Mishra. Yes, please come over, and this is the keynote address, which is at last because of scheduling problem, and it is not by any means that it should have been at the first one. So we very much welcome Mr. Mishra and look forward to his keynote presentation, which will be followed by several questions and answers as much we can shift our lunch, and all the participants may agree to extend a little bit more beyond 2 p.m.
মাইক্রোফোন এটা ঠিকই আছে, অসুবিধা নেই। জয়েন করে নাও, তারপর শেয়ার স্ক্রিন একটু করে দিন। ফাইন্ড ইট, এটাতে ইকো আসছে। I find it a little bit more convenient to speak sitting, so I'm sorry. So, এটা so I came to know work Sundarban. I came to know working for Sundarban when I joined the irrigation department, and when actually because of repeated cyclones which are formed in Bay of Bengal, we came to understand that there are problems. And at that time, we realized that, till that time in our department, that it's irrigation department, it was somehow a very engineering centric kind of an approach, wherein, if there is an embankment and if there is some tidal wave and if it is breaking, then the basic idea was to build a stronger, bigger embankment. And that is something which we realize that it is not leading us to really anywhere, because you know how big an embankment you can build. And that is the time when we started looking at the nature-based solutions. And we are all discussing Sundarban today. We were deliberating. I mean, I am one of those who believe that Sundarban can offer certain things which perhaps no other ecosystem can. And this is my first assumption. And my second assumption is that many of the problems, actually the solutions for the problems that Sundarban is facing is actually embedded, and the solutions are embedded in the problems itself. And Mr. Anurag, when he was showing some of the solutions, I mean, he was showing some photographs. I wish he could have shown it there. You know, how there is silt available in the tidal rivers, and how if you can catch and trap that silt, how it can really act to your advantage and can strengthen, can build some kind of a foreshore, and then can help build a more resilient kind of a engineering structure. So, and along with that, the connection with the mangroves and all that. So basically, we were looking for how to approach Sundarban. I will very quickly run through the slides. It is actually showing some problem. Slide যাচ্ছে না. So yeah. So some of these numbers you already know. That is not relevant. The idea here, the main, the core point in this slide is that because of various tectonic changes and the reduction of the freshwater availability and inflow into Sundarban, which the first speaker was alluding to, Jalongi and all those rivers, because of that, the problem is that the salinity in Sundarban is going up. And for example, the kind of fish species that were available at certain point where are no longer available, and because the salinity have changed, even the Sundarban, the different types of the mangroves which are available, they are now becoming extinct. So this is the famous line which we all know, and Anurag has, I am very happy that he built another line, something, you know, to differentiate the two parts which in Sundarbans. And the good part in this line is that if you look carefully at the tidal rivers, they are almost at the tip of the tidal rivers. So the idea was that, you know, the tidal rivers have this kind of an overflow when there is a high tide, and the silt is actually spread out. And that is how the Sundarban, you know, there is this delta formation. That is how it is an active delta formation. And the problem has come up because of so many interventions and, you know, habitations. And to save habitation, now we want to kind of put embankments on both sides of these tidal rivers, which means that they are not able to spread out the silt, which means two problems. One, the delta is not really getting enriched. And also, whatever silt is there, that is going to be deposited in the riverbed itself. So the cross section of the rivers are actually reducing. And if you look at Matla was mentioned today sometime back. Matla, such a mighty river, it's getting silted. I mean, there is a huge problem. I'll come to that in a while. How, you know, in public policy, and that is where, when you are confronted with a problem, we have to have sustainable solutions, sustainable options. So the sustainable options and solutions, these are very old, you know, jargons. I mean, nothing new about it. But, you know, on one side, you have to look at community, their livelihood needs, and natural-based resource-based livelihood generation, and then related tragedy of commons, which has been mentioned a while back very nicely. And the related idea of moral ecology, I love that idea, very nicely put by my previous speaker. So this is where we stand, and we have to carefully, when we are doing the policy contour, We have to carefully pick up the solutions which are sustainable and which really make a difference to the lives of people, because that is where they will be picked up, as Anurag was very rightly pointing out, because if they are not making a difference, then people won't adopt that. So now you see these are the tidal rivers, and most of the tidal rivers, they got disconnected from, the fresh water, this thing, because Ganga Padma system drifted to east in the last 200 years. There's a disconnect and the freshwater inflow going down. And, we are, in any case, we are just putting embankments. So that is the problem, the silt getting embedded on the bed itself, and that is the problem. The problem, for example, with Matla is also because these tidal rivers have this ecological, connection with the wetlands, because they bring the system by expanding freshwater flow into Sundarban, and that is another project. So we took actually two projects. One was for upper delta, one was lower delta, and upper delta with ADB assistance is looking at how we can expand freshwater inflow into Sundarbans by fixing Yamuna river system, fixing the Jalangi river basin. And in our budget speech, if you have seen, there is this new scheme of Nadi Bandhan, where essentially we are saying the same thing, because the idea is that the plan is to go basin wise, and then you take a river basin and then interconnect it with wetlands, interconnect it with other tributaries, so that the overall freshwater availability goes up, and then the thing looks better. So that is what it is. Difficult to do because Ganga Padma river levels are very, very difficult now. So for example, the Ganga Padma river is much lower than Jalangi offtake. Now how to handle it is a very tricky issue, but what we have observed is that during the monsoon, when the Padma is full of monsoon, then you will get ahead, and then you can tap some water into the Jalangi system, which will help Bangladesh also, because they have a flooding problem at that time. So it will be a win-win kind of thing. It has an international dimension also. So you can understand the complexity which we face on the policy table. And these are some of the nature-based solutions which we are trying to trap. Obviously, it actually is different when it is an erosion zone or an accretion zone. For an erosion zone, you have to have this kind of a mangrove system, a dwarf embankment, allowing the silt, allowing the tidal river to overtop, put a bit of silt in between where the mangroves can regenerate. There are some other fantastic solutions attempted by Anurag, where, with some ring structures, they have trapped the silt and then their mangroves are regenerating, which is a wonderful thing to happen. If you have the sea-facing embankment, then there is a real problem, because their trapping silt and then getting mangroves regeneration is not so easy. We tried a little bit of these techniques in Bankim Nagar using some nature-based solution. It is in progress. You can see there are certain wooden structures which allow the tidal things to come in, and then the silt is trapped. So the water flows away and the silt is there. So with these structures, we could really combat a bit of erosion in Bankim Nagar last year. But yes, the mangrove that you can see at the fringe, this area was full of mangroves. Now there is no mangrove, as you all know. You have worked so intensively in those areas. So these are, of course, some of the very healthy growth of mangroves in some part of, just near embankment, and it helps the embankment a lot, as you are aware. So how to, build embankments? Embankments have to be there in some way, because there are habitations. You cannot do away with it. There are villages. But then the idea is that there has to be some overtopping needs to be allowed. And that will actually help everybody. It will help the tidal river. It will also help the island. And there has to be a balance. So that balancing act has to happen. But in any case, you have to have land for embankment construction. And then there are so many issues when you try to look for embankment, and you cannot do it unless you have a very good contact with community. So some micro planning has to happen on an island, understanding where the embankments can be built, where the embankments can be built with a lower height, which will allow the tidal inflow and overtopping and so on and so forth. Another picture where, mangroves are protecting embankments, nature-based solutions. This is, of course, Govardhanpur, where women as self-help groups have been involved in regeneration of mangroves with, the seedlings and the nursery beds, as you can see. But as you know, mangroves regenerate on their own if you create a conducive environment, and it doesn't really require that you have to necessarily plant the mangroves. And the mangrove forests, actually, the way they are providing the services, they are not very visible sometimes in public policy domain. So that is why the stakeholders and the push is not so much. In fact, as you saw a while ago, mangroves are being cut for shrimp farming. So then their ecological services are not very visible. So that is a failure, kind of a, you can say, market failure. in economics terms, where the economic activity actually is getting swung towards where you get the maximum profit or maximum uh, earning. So these are the things. But then if you go to village and look at people at large, mangrove is definitely providing lot of ecological services. And if you ask them, they will say that yes, this mangrove is required for us. So that is there. So therefore, uh, community participation, which has been coming in various discussions in different forms, and without community, nothing can be sustainable. It is a well-known paradigm, developmental paradigm. So basically, we have also tried to weave that into the embankment construction, like embankment protection committees, because suppose we are building embankments, then thereafter there are ponds, so very deeper ponds. So it creates a hydrological pressure on the embankment. It is very difficult for us to monitor from a distance, and people, therefore these protection committees and this thing. One micro planning, you just see how in Kumirmari Island we were trying to do, and the internal, all these old silted creeks, they have been now re-excavated, and we are storing the fresh water and trying to, again, sustainable solutions. So we are trying to inject freshwater giant prawn instead of the saline shrimp farming, so that agriculture and aquaculture can coexist. So that is what you see here. So the silted creek has been excavated in Sundarban, and then we have actually, now it shows 400. We have almost crossed 700 kilometers of creeks have been excavated in Sundarbans, capturing the fresh water, triggering lot of livelihood activities, freshwater based livelihood activities, so that agriculture is not impeded. And then of course there are a whole lot of other opportunities in agriculture. I won't go into detail for the benefit of time. And yes, if you put up these polyhouses, protected agriculture, value added products, there is a lot of hope. And then there are a lot of pisciculture. This is what I was saying, integrated mangrove cum shrimp farming, where mangrove and shrimp both are there. So, the leaves of mangrove basically fall and become feed for fish feed, so that you don't push another feed for the fish. Because if you put the artificial feed, it is full of nitrogen. The nitrogen load actually increases the incidence of diseases. So that is the problem. But this is a nature-based solution. Again, these are some of the value chain that has been created, from the spawn to fingerling to the final culture. So there are some self-help groups in Kumirmari. Again, there are some animal resources which you can see here. And of course, this this honey production, where you can have these Apis serena, which is the local indigenous honeybee, so that can be tapped. So this, I deliberately have put both these photographs. So Apis mellifera is not actually suitable in Sundarban context. So that was the thing. And then all those things, there are certain infrastructure gaps because of the far-flung islands. And then there are whole lot of prescriptions here how to really regenerate mangroves. And then the suggested strategy for upper delta and the lower delta, I was mentioning it. And then the conclusion is that definitely we have to have these kind of, we have to handle silt by expanding freshwater availability in the Sundarbans. We have to have nature-based solutions, basin with river and wetland management, mangroves, and integrated mangrove cum aquaculture. These are some of the policy lessons learned in our limited, the time when we have worked this thing. And then, of course, you can have carbon credit and all that, so that, community gets a stake in the mangrove system, etc., etc. So I will stop here. We are running out of time. So thank you very much for, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mishra. It was quite sort of impressive, I would say, to have someone working in the irrigation ministry, and then expanding into, when we talk of irrigation, we only think of Cusecs. And he's talking of something very different, very diverse. And it reminds me of a definition of river flows as webs. Webs meaning you have the water, but engineers only think of Cusecs. But Cusecs with a quality, with the temperature, the water is not only volume. Then webs means water, energy, biodiversity, and sediment. Unless you have all these dimensions describing a river flow, your engineering will be always topsy-turvy. Because if you impact on the water by transfer of water for irrigation or whatever it be, as we have seen in many dams, as we have seen in Farakka, the sediment dynamics is grossly changed. When the sediment dynamics is grossly changed, we have problem with the biodiversity. And finally, the whole issue of energy, whether the riverbed is up and down, whether the potential energy is low or high, all these are part of an integrated, emerging integrated understanding of water, which is water, energy, biodiversity, and sediment. And I think in a dynamic delta situation as we have in the Sundarbans, the perception of this multidimensional perception of water is very, very important. And I'm very happy that this is emerging from within the irrigation department, where the role of sediment, role of even biodiversity is very, very important. And energy can decide whether the flow will be from direction north to south or south to north or east west, depending on which river is at a higher energy level or lower energy level. So it's exactly past 2 minutes past 2. I think we'll go for a number of questions. We'll take 3 at a time. Please raise your hand. Those who are having the hand microphone, please take care of giving it to them. Yeah, please go ahead. And it will be nice to have your self-introduction. Yeah, there is a question there.
Okay.
So we will call and we'll provide the hand mic.
Thank you, sir. I am Sneha Biswas. Currently, I'm affiliated with
Please
this
speak into
Hyderabad.
the mic.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So my question is to Dr. Rajarshi Dasgupta. Sir, you mentioned that resilience needs to be defined. It needs to be measured. So we have different indexes: resilient index, vulnerability index, but also we have numerous narratives from Sundarbans, ethnographic studies. Yesterday, Dr. Devojyoti Das showed use of photo voice method to capture migration pattern. So my question is which also gives in-depth understanding of the place. So my question is it always necessary to have quantitative information to formulate public policy? Thank you.
We'll take 3 questions and then the answers. Yeah, those who are having the mic, please use your discretion to give it to whoever is raising the hand.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, sure. So all the presenters are requested to come over to the DS and yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, my questions, not questions, I want to know rather from Mr. Sir. Actually, whenever we Sir, whenever we're going to do any civil construction in terms of the road or in terms of railway line, we have to do the slope analysis, slope zone map. And you know that from Bardhaman to Howrah, there is a so old railway line. That line not going to create any local drainage congestion. Now come to the Sundarban. In Sundarban, so many tidal creeks are there. And the tidal creeks, even after construction of the embankment, tidal creeks by geomorphological processes, they are going to enrich the height by deposition of the sediments internally. But what I have observed, that tidal creeks are being closed and a local name is going there, that closure, and funded by the government. Without any doing the micro level slope analysis, closure is going to build on the tidal creeks, and all islands are now severely affected by drainage conditions and what we can say inundation without any breaching of the embankment, without any overtoppling of the water, without any tidal surge. The all islands are suffering from inundations, what by in turn going to low productivity. So government, why not going to study, or did government study the slow analysis? This is my query. In addition, you know, in low-lying area, initially people are going to build their homes so-called dry point by uplifting the land, by depositing the soil, by cutting dug the pond. That is being discussed. Now the people moving from here to there, this village path, footpath converted into the now road by concretization without sufficient culvert, without sufficient sluice gate. So I don't know what is happening. So this is my basic query. Maybe wrong I am, but I want to know because you are doing that.
Do you have any particular presenter in mind?
I have addressed to the Mr.
Okay. Now, third question is from there, and then we'll go for round of response.
My question is to Dr. Dasgupta. Concerned to the strategic implementation of blue economy, Sundarban is an important point. So with respect to that, we see that there are global level issues of fish overcatching, marine depletion of resources, bycatch, and ghost gears, which are devastating in the case of the deaths occurring annually for the marine animals and other species. So for these results to be addressed, how the strategic policies being taken into account in India, particularly for the sensitive areas of Sundarbans, where marine mammals are at danger, their lives are at stake.
Have you addressed any particular presenter? Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you can select your sequences.
Yeah, 2 questions directed to me. Thank you very much. So the answer to the first question is it necessary? No. But is it recommended? Yes. The reason because, let me give you an example. So if I say that the resilience of Sundarban has increased since the last 10 years, would you agree? Why? What is the reference point? Right? So we need something to, to start with, especially, and for some reason, our policy planners are obsessed with numbers. So we have a beautiful figure called 3 billion tons of CO2 to be sequestered by 2030. I asked where from this? We have some models, but nobody damn knows what is the exact component of those. So they are good at numbers. They believe numbers. In a way, it helps you to convince the policy planner. But alternatively, you can also use qualitative method, and we use qualitative method in some cases, as he was mentioning. Coming to your question, so to be precise, you are asking what are the policies we can see. So you mean to say like, what should we do, right? Definitely, we have a carrying capacity assessment that has to be done. I can again tell you a very short story. So my professor used to be a well meat eater, big well. So he used to be a well meat eater, and he had done a fantastic research to prove that well hunting by Japanese sort of, it's good. Because that's the highest topic that they are just obliterating, and that helps the fish square. But his none of his paper got published. No, I'm telling you. So basically, this there are, when you make a policy, there are different standpoint of view. So this is of course the global views that played an important role. I'm not sure. Like I'm saying, whether it answers directly to a question, but we do need to have a kind of ecological carrying capacity. Without that, we cannot say anything. Whether it is over, in fact, you take the statistics, you will see there's a consistent increase of fish catch, right? So is it ecologically sustainable? Definitely no. So I think that's where the question ends. Yeah, my take on this, and I cannot recall exact policy you are referring to, but that this is the maximum sustainable yield, what we call MSY, that has to be calculated for every species that is being exploited by human.
Yeah, please. Anyone else?
No, he has to respond.
Just to add to what he was saying, that if suppose you do not capture the silt data, then you don't know what is happening to the silt and sedimentation. So while you might be thinking that, okay, I am building these embankments and these things. So data has to be there. Some of these data has to be measured and brought to the table to have a good solution and a sustainable solution. Now, coming back to my question, which is related to tidal river closure. If I have understood the question properly, I am not aware whether any tidal river is actually being closed by government like that. No, closed means. Huh.
Tidal river is north-south direction, which is east-west alignment, is just like a branch we call technically tidal creeks. Those creeks were alive even after the embankment being built on a particular island. That time, the mouth of the creeks being closed by the government.
Now, the technical reason for closure of these creeks, I am certainly not aware. I mean, to my understanding, the more not ending into the tidal rivers. They are standalone.
Not rivers, creeks.
Creeks, no, they are not connected to creeks at all. They are actually old silted, what should I say, channels, perennial channels, which actually is not connected to tidal river or creek at all. They are a standalone river. You can say it is like a water
A
harvesting
relic,
structure.
what was they are telling, that paleo channel or something like that.
Paleo channel or something like that. Yeah.
Urban Development Board re-excavated 400 kilometers plus canal during IFAT project.
Exactly. So
But
if
these
you
were completely silted up. It is in the year 1981 to 1989. After that, those were not re-excavated, and almost all are choked, and no water is now stored there.
I think they are trying to do that. So that can be a very advantageous position. But if you re-excavate that 400 kilometers and you store fresh water, so
Yes.
that will help.
That request.
So
and
I think
deliberately what we did was that
that is the same
encouraging community to have fresh water giant prawn in that. So that
okay. Bacteroactum rosenbergi, you are cultivating.
yes,
Yeah.
also bhetki. In fact, they are doing
Yeah.
polyculture because bhetki can have a little bit of saline. You know, it can it a mixed kind of thing.
Two more questions, and then we break.
You just asked, is there any change in the resilience of communities in Sundarbans? What change you want to mention? What are those changes?
Yeah, I think one more question, and then we go for answers. Yeah.
I was interested to know, like we have been talking about various policies and frameworks and kind of planning, which is sounds quite good in paper, but how much political will is there to implement these policies? That is, I think, a very important.
I can answer this is the last question.
Okay.
So,
Answer.
No, I will tell you, everybody today is looking for a solution. After, I think, Aila, Yash, yeah. Yash was one of the worst cyclones, as you know, because, you know, the landfall actually got synchronized with the high tide. And that is the time when I think 7.5 meter height came. And then, though Amphan was a stronger cyclone, but the devastation by Yash was much more because of this region. And thereafter, if you have carefully noticed the newspapers and other things, and basically there was this, it triggered the framing of Sundarban master plan, for which the irrigation department was the nodal point. And I interacted with, I came just after Yash in irrigation. And then I interacted with all the departments, and we have built the master plan. We were learning and we were adapting the master plan. I won't say it is a perfect master plan, but the master plan gave us kind of a blueprint based on which we devised and designed the two very major projects which is coming up now for Sundarbans. Upper Delta with the Asian Development Bank, around 200 million US dollars, and lower Sundarban Delta with World Bank, around 450 million US dollars. And please remember, I don't know whether there is somebody from forest here, but what there is now, because of the multi-dimensional aspect of the Sundarban, fixing Sundarban problems, that $450 million is not just embankments and concrete and hardware. You know, it is 50, this is almost 50% is the embankment, but the balance 50% is devoted to mangroves, to livelihoods, to community-based initiatives, everybody. And then we have a structural, institutional structure under the leadership of the district magistrate who will just push it. So I'm just giving you how, you know, people want to do something, but let me tell you, we have to learn from our past and initiatives taken by Sundarban Development Board and all those, like 400 kilometers was silted and all that. So we have to dig it out options which have given results, options which are sustainable, options which can be enriched with the latest paradigm in handling how to handle delta. And then yes, you have to have funding from somewhere. So that is happening. I can assure you that that is definitely happening.
Okay, so thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I'll just try to respond to
Yeah.
questions which was directed to me. The first question is about politics. Allow me, if Dandura allows, I'll again talk about theory, which is the multiple stream framework, what we teach in public policy. So basically what we have is three streams going parallelly. First is the problem scheme. So we are aware of the problem. Second is the policy stream, and third is the politics. So when we say that this knowledge or this accumulation of knowledge will transfer to a policy through politics, and these three parallel streams hardly intercoincides. When it coincides, I didn't discuss it because of paucity of time, during or after the disasters. When you have a shock, then suddenly you see that these three streams collide for a fraction of time, then again it goes. So I think that's a pretty pertinent question, and it's not just in Sundarban, everywhere. So I think that's my answer. And coming back to your question, I would have in a better position to answer your question had I had this 2021 data released, census data released, and I have the land use maps and other things. But overall, what I'm saying is a macro view of resilience that is based on certain indicators which are primarily derived from HDI. I think the last report what Tuhinda was saying that 2009 is the last 24 Parganas report. After that, there's no study has been taken. I think that's very pertinent to have a study. What is the change, the status of human development index in the Delta? I think I would have been in a better position if I have the data. But unfortunately, I don't know even with this government whether they're going to publish this data set soon. So that's my sort of answer. Anybody can join.
Well, if there is no other response from the dais, I think it's almost 2:25 and it's time for us to break for lunch. And I thank Mr. Mishra and all the other presenters. I thank those who have raised the questions, comments, and this is a challenging task. We should not think that one session will bring us in front of the solution, but it should make us progress at least a little bit towards that solution. And with that, we close this session. And if there is no other announcement from the organizers, let us break and go for lunch.